across Canada. We'll be traveling across the country to meet Canadian bright lights. I look forward to sharing my holiday lights with you. In the meantime, why don't you share what brings you light this holiday season?
Being stuck in your home during this pandemic also means you have a home. Waiting in line for groceries means you have money for groceries. The isolation, being broke and totally scared about what's next. I was feeling that before this crisis. People say we're in this together, but me, I've got no one.
Youth who have aged out of the child welfare system are in danger of falling further through the cracks because of today's crisis. They need your support. Please give today at helpyouthnow.ca.
This is Rogers TV.
Today on Voices of Grey, we're going to take a look back at the county's lumbering and furniture making history and then speak with Grant Nicholson, a designer and CNC machinist from Upper Canada Stretchers, who will tell us all about how wood products are being used in their business today. As villages and towns began to pop up along the Toronto, Sydenham and Garifraxa roads, industry followed. Next to agriculture, lumber was one of the first industries in the Queen's Bush. Sawmills rapidly grew in number, and with the coming of the railways and steamers, shipment of wood and lumber increased. One of the biggest local industries was furniture making, and by 1865, there were three main furniture making regions in Grey County: Durham, Hanover, and Owen Sound. The Durham Furniture Factory was started in 1899 as a community initiative to provide employment for young people. By 1900, the company employed 32 staff who were paid 7 cents an hour for a 10-hour day. The first shipment of furniture from the new company was in February of 1900 to Manchester, England. Disaster struck in March 1905 when the factory burned to the ground. Reconstruction began immediately, and by 1910, the plant included a sawmill and a large addition. In 1912, Durham Furniture became the first company in Ontario to generate its own electric power. By 1928, the Durham Furniture Company owned approximately 2,000 acres of bush in Grey County. They employed 75 people in lumber operations and 180 in the furniture plant. The factory itself was over 100,000 square feet and consumed about 3 million board feet of lumber each year. During the Depression, sales dropped dramatically, but rather than letting employees go, the company instituted a Share the Work program that ensured everyone received a little income. Over the years, the company became known across the nation as one of the best producers of fine quality furniture. A major buyer of Durham furniture was the T. Eaton Company, which included the company's products in its catalog. In 1954, the largest furniture manufacturing company in the world, Kroller Furniture Manufacturing, purchased the Durham Furniture Company. It immediately undertook major renovations and over the next 24 years added more buildings and machinery. In 1979, the Canadian division of Kroller was sold to the Strathern House Group in Toronto. More recently, Durham Chair and Store Fixtures produced restaurant, school, office, and store fixtures. In Hanover, brothers Peter and Daniel Knechtel started Knechtel Furniture in 1873. In 1882, Peter sold his interest to Daniel, and in 1884, the first brick building was erected. On December 20th, 1900, the entire plant was destroyed by fire, throwing 200 people out of work. A year later, Knechtel built a new plant and business resumed. During World War II, the company produced plywood parts for the Mosquito bomber. In order to ensure a steady supply of wood, in 1947, the company began a series of reforestation projects. The North American Bent Chair Company was established in Owen Sound in 1892 to take advantage of the plentiful natural resources and good shipping. The name of the company comes from the method of manufacture used, in which the wood for the back legs of the chairs was steamed until it was pliable and then bent around the backrest. The company's waterfront factory was destroyed in a spectacular fire in 1899, throwing 250 people out of work and causing $100,000 in damage. Despite the fact that only about 1/4 of the loss was covered by insurance, a new 3-story plant was opened on the site the following year. The National Table Company was founded around 1898 when William Hamilton Merritt Sr. purchased 325 feet of waterfront property on the east side of the Owen Sound Harbor. It began operations with 25 employees and made quality bedroom and dining room furniture. It closed for a brief period of time during the Depression. However, it resumed full operations in 1938 with 64 staff and continued to grow. The establishment of the large furniture factories in Grey County had a dramatic effect on farmers. Managing their woodlots became a means of bridging the gap between income and expenses. They became stewards of their land, selectively harvesting and replanting to ensure future income. Clear-cutting forest for quick gain was a short-sighted approach scorned by many as irresponsible. At one point, the furniture factories of Grey and Bruce counties were responsible for 25% of the furniture produced in Ontario, but time and progress took their toll. The North American Bent Chair Company closed in 1945 after being sold to RCA Victor. By the 1940s, the National Table Company was making radios, sewing machines, and by the end of the decade, wooden cabinets for televisions. The advent of plastics for making many of those items spelled an end to the company in 1960. The Nectel Furniture Company went bankrupt in 1985 due to a combination of high interest rates, the recession, the high Canadian dollar, and free trade that reduced the industry by 50%. In 1992, the end was also in sight for the Durham Furniture Factory. However, with local investment, reorganization, and new product lines, it is still in existence today, producing bedroom furniture and occasional tables for the North American furniture market. It employs 170 people and continues to uphold the proud tradition of quality furniture manufacturing that was once Grey County's largest industry. So here we are in collection storage at Grey Roots Museum and Archives, and we're talking about furniture today, and furniture that was specifically made in Grey County. And this is our latest acquisition, which came to us from down around the London area. And it's a piece made by the Harris Furniture and Chair Company, Limited of Owen Sound. And it's from the 1950s, and it's just lovely because I can remember as a child having something similar with the decals on here that made it child-friendly. And as you can see on this piece here, it's stamped number 578. So this would be model number 578. And with the donation came these adorable photos of the donor's sister in the crib as a child. 10-inch television made by RCA Victor belonged to his father. He grew up in Northern Ontario, and it was bought secondhand in the early 1940s. And his father would only turn it on for 1 hour a day, and all the neighbors would come to watch television with him, and it would be a social hour because it's the only television in the area at the time. And it was made by the RCA Victor Owen Sound Cabinet Division. And a lot of the chairs and tables, buffets, hutches, china cabinets, etc. that you see on the shelves here were made by Owen Sound companies, including the Owen Sound Bent Chair Company, the Owen Sound Furniture Factory, and the Harris Furniture Factory. And as mentioned, the Owen Sound Bent Chair Company bent its wood and shaped it using the steaming method and then attached it, and that was a signature to its pieces.
I'm Stephanie McMullen from Grey Roots Museum and Archives, and with me today is Grant Nicholson from Upper Canada Stretchers. Thanks for coming, Grant.
Thanks for having me.
I know that we are in for a treat today with you because over the years I've worked with you on a lot of different projects, and you are one of the most artistic and creative people that I've ever met, and you have a really deep pool of knowledge. So I know we're going to have a really interesting conversation today.
Geez, that's a lot to live up to.
So Grant, you are originally from this area.
Yes, I'm from Tara.
Yeah, and you were away for a while getting experience and various things elsewhere, and then you came back. What brought you back to the area?
Really, I think one of the things that I like the most about the area is the botanical diversity, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. When I lived up in the north, I found that we had fewer different types of trees and plants and things, and that was less inspiring to me. Mm. So I came back basically to be on the Bruce Trail and to be in our woodlands.
Certainly it's a beautiful area, and we've all had a lot of opportunity to explore that this summer. So I think we all have a better appreciation of the diversity in our area. Some of the projects, of course, that we worked on together at the museum are historical in nature. And Grey County's forests were huge and diverse in the earliest times of settlement. And it attracted the attention of furniture builders. And furniture building was a big industry around here at a certain point in our history. As someone who works with wood, what would you like to work with that's from Grey County?
Well, Grey County's host to a few of the special ones. We're really well prized with good stands of maple. We also have walnut to get to the other extreme. I've been fortunate to get hold of a lot of really beautiful cherry wood as well in the region. Those would probably be the three that stand out the most, but we also have, you know, given what's going on currently, we have a lot of ash trees in the marketplace. Right. And they're good for lots of other structural applications and things, and flooring. Yeah, I think that those are sort of key things that we've worked here for a really long time.
We've worked together on exhibit design before, and you've done a lot of really beautiful signage, both here at the museum and at places throughout Grey, Bruce, and even into Simcoe County. What projects are you working on now?
Well, currently I'm making a whole bunch of signage that's for a brewery in British Columbia, so that's today's big project. I've always got a few interesting things on the go. Currently I'm working on building a large tree inside of a nursery so that kids can sit under it for lunch and so on. That's kind of an interesting project. I'm also working on designing and producing staircase parts, and I would like to use new methods of joinery that have become available to us, and that sort of fits into the automated world that I operate in. So yeah, there are a bunch of things on the go.
Well, you touched on a really interesting point that you know, in the late 19th and early 20th century, there were a lot of factories here, and furniture making was a big industry, but one of the reasons that it developed, particularly in the Hanover region, was individual craftsmen. Nowadays, you're combining craftsmanship with automation. And what changes have you seen just over the course of your career?
Well, one of the most interesting things for me has been, in fact, going from that. So I went into the print industry back in the early 90s and had the pleasure of working with somebody who actually kern typed with a saw. Meaning that the letters were physical and they were moving them together. You know, in the time of my career, I've had the chance to work with people like that, all the way up through this very automated world that I'm in now, currently operating essentially robots that do a lot of work. There's one working right now while I'm here talking to everybody. Those changes are really huge. But other changes that we see now are really changing the marketplace, and it's almost surprising how that becomes highlighted with COVID. People would talk about Industry 3, which would mean that manufacturers are starting to sell directly to the buyer. Instead of distributing into huge networks, we now see a lot more activity online with people buying things directly from us. And we're a good example in working in Grey County and shipping 60% of our work to the US, mainly New York City and Los Angeles. And those clients are contacting us without talking to somebody else along the way. And the future holds a world where we're going to see a lot more automation, and that's going to mean that not only do people order from the company that manufactures, but almost right from the machine that manufactures. And that's called Industry 4. It's coming where they call it lights out. There will be one person there and a whole bunch of machinery running.
Wow. And yet at the same time, you have an artistic vision. You're able to see things when you look at wood and see potential, and that's still going to have a place in the world, I think. Yeah,
the world isn't just full of people that want something with slight customizations. Maybe it's a little bigger, it's got an extra drawer or something. People want things that are deeply personal, and I can't see myself ever stopping creating that work. and the ability to take something that's got an incredible value like wood and subtract from it until we reveal the beautiful object. That's a wondrous process, and we can't do that by adding with 3D printing or any other technological methods. And that warmth, I feel, is just deeply imbued in people in general. So I anticipate always doing that.
And so what kinds of work does Upper Canada Stretchers do? I mean, it's kind of a fun name, so.
Yeah, well, it's funny because we become mistaken for gurneys once in a while.
Yeah, I could see that.
But what we do is create the frames that artists stretch their paintings on.
Okay.
And so I'm able, with our modern technology, to receive a drawing of a shape that somebody did on a napkin, if wish be, and blow it up 20 feet in length, create segments of it that bust down into a small package and ship it to New York or as far away as Denmark and Italy. We've sent our jobs like that.
Wow.
Some of the work has been really intriguing. We did a bunch of three-dimensional painting stretchers where the paintings were upholstered onto big 30-inch thick paintings that hung out of the ceiling and stuck up out of the floor.
Oh, that's really cool.
We did a $100,000 19-foot disc that was hung in Detroit that was completely covered in fractals that were hand-painted on. It was massive.
Wow. Wow.
There are a lot of unique types of things that go on because we're dealing with such a creative audience.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. How many people are with you at Upper Canada?
We're currently running around 8 or 9 people.
Wow.
So it's just a modest-sized business, about 7,000 feet of workspace.
When did you start?
The company started 18 years ago.
Okay.
The segment that I represent was my company, and as Upper Canada Stretchers was my biggest client, we decided to join forces. So that happened in 2015.
Okay.
And we've been sort of pioneering new products and ideas since then.
Well, it's certainly a move that makes a lot of sense. Now, over the years, you have worked on so many diverse projects in this area. Are there any that really jump into your memory as something that you really had fun with, or you were challenged with and you found a solution and you felt really satisfied?
There've been, one of the funny things about my career, I guess, is that we have to focus so hard on some of the technical things that we do, and we get into these projects that take everything you've got, and then you're in another one and you forget. And I've got work everywhere I go, and people point it out to me. Sometimes I actually need to be reminded. I think some of the things that I've enjoyed the most were carving things.
Right.
I did an African mahogany door that was shipped to Dubai that had a whole bunch of symbolism from one of the old cathedrals that was in that area. And another one that comes to mind would be I started making symbolic tarot carvings that were quite large. There's a piece there that I've been working on that I'm kind of intrigued by. Currently I'm doing a staircase that has leaves inlaid from the trees in all the treads and ferns wrapped around the newel posts and so on. That is currently what I'm really excited about.
Sounds beautiful. And how do people come across you? Like,
usually it's been through referrals.
Okay.
Grey County is not exactly an enormous booming metropolis, so people do find you that way, and then they tell other people. We have lots of new people in the area that have been contacting me because they've heard about the work. We also have an online presence and portfolio, but I find that usually the more creative projects are because people have heard about, someone that will do their work.
okay, that makes sense. Interesting question. I'd really like to have your perspective on it, because we've talked about automation and robots and shipping around the world, and we've also talked about some of the unique woods that come from Grey County. So how do you think that, or how do you see Upper Canada Stretchers on the historical timeline from an area that used forests and made furniture for settlers here and settlers out west up to the modern day, where we're using robots and shipping around the world. Do you feel a strong legacy with the historical past of using wood in this area?
I do. I think that woodworking is something kind of primeval, sort of like the urge that I found in building a house.
Right.
There's something that we've always wanted to do, and there are many men and women that are both deeply attracted to that. And the thing about that is wood continues to be a fickle material. We've tried to grow it in squares, we've tried to change it, we've tried to do all kinds of things, but it expands more in one direction than another. It wants to move and has an incredible expansive power of its own. And the somewhat primitive challenges of facing that we saw in violins from Stradivarius persist as the same challenges to the day. And using white glue to bind two pieces of wood together under pressure and make something that's stronger than the rest of the material continues to be a primitive process using simple materials. So the heritage of wood stays alive because of that very nature that's imbued right in it, that our working with it continues to be something more unique and natural in its own way than many other things that we nowadays tend to work with in our laminated world.
That's an absolutely excellent point. I mean, you're working with wood. Wood is a living thing. I'm looking at the wooden floor right in front of us, and even though these things have been milled and planed, every single strip of wood is different.
Yeah.
There's genuinely like snowflakes. There's no two pieces of wood that are exactly the same.
I like how wood collects memory. We find people seeking out old barns and beams and pieces because the memory written all over the wood, the patina of that piece, means something to people. We love the fact that where people have run their hands over a stair baluster for 100 years, it starts getting polished, even if it's the one that leads to the stable in the barn that's become smooth in such a crude area. Wood has the ability to accompany us through our walk through life. We pass on heritage pieces, and they're typically not plastic. They tend to be made out of wood, other materials that have some kind of value to us.
That's an excellent point. And so over the course of your, say, the last 20 years of your career, how do you feel that what do you think wood's taught you? I know it's kind of an esoteric question, but I feel like you're really in touch with wood and you've learned from it.
Well, I believe that art and symbolism have the ability to become almost like circuitry for humans, that we create art to remind us of things, to tell us of things, to tell us things from voices of people long gone. They're still speaking through that piece of art. And I think that wood's like that. We have a reciprocal relation with it. The way we see wood when it comes into our home in a new form is much different than how we see it going out 30 years later.
True.
I think that special quality of it is something that we don't expect to lose anytime soon. And even the very best of our wood in Canada goes to other countries. We're prized for that. For example, Japan takes the best of all of the red cedar out west because their damp climate requires it more than we need it. We're kind of like a repository here in Canada. You know, when we talk about trees, people often talk about climate change in relation to how many trees per person are there. In some countries, particularly in Europe, it's like 4 or maybe up as many as 10 trees per person. We're about 10,000 in Canada.
Wow.
So we have a special place and a special legacy with wood.
That's really neat. And that legacy, it sort of reminds me of in the 19th century when there was a lot of clear cutting going on throughout southern Ontario as people were trying to open land and create fields. There was a report by the Federal Department of Agriculture in 1881 that talked about this deforestation of southern Ontario, but it did make special note of some of the areas in Grey County where people were already thinking about reforestation and conservation. And one of the parts that really tickled me was reading about Kilsyth, which the reporters highlighted as an area of inspiration. They wanted it to serve as inspiration for the rest of the country because they were planting maples along the sides of the road and along people's driveways. And then I was riding my bike this summer, and the south entrance to Kilsyth, those trees that line the road there so beautifully are the trees that those agriculturalists were talking about in the report. They're still there, and they're still with us today. We have a really interesting legacy here with that.
Yes.
And the maple in particular, I know we had talked a bit about maple in the Chatsworth area, and that we had used maple in Grey Roots in our main foyer. All of the countertops are this beautiful honey-colored maple. And so we're well known for that around the world, do you think?
Yes, Canadian maple is something of note. And in fact, even one of the export government representatives has been talking. He talked to me actually about maybe presenting some pieces that he can ship out to show off the different species, because people do contact us based on that. Our wood organization, the Blue Water Wood Alliance, has about 100 members, and those members are finding that like we were approached and got involved in a project that was going on in Saudi Arabia. The city of Mecca is expanding by 4 million people over a 20-year period.
Holy
and
smokes.
they just don't have wood.
Right.
So it was great because they chose to come and see if Canadians wanted to supply all of the things to build a university or wood aspects of all of these buildings going up, because they have to get it from somewhere, and their Canadian reputation is intact.
Wow. And so tell me a little bit more about the local Wood Alliance, the Blue Water Wood Alliance. What exactly is that?
So in Europe they have what they call clusters.
Okay.
And they're clusters of companies that are like companies. And what seems strange about a cluster of companies is they tend to be the same, and they're in the same region, so they tend to be competing with each other.
Yeah, that's sort of my first thought.
So for us to take a big swath of woodworking companies doing cabinetry and staircases and flooring and lumber in the middle of Ontario, we're obviously talking to a lot of people that are competing for the same business.
Yeah.
But the advantage is that we also make ourselves eligible as a very well-organized group of companies for funding from the government. We have training initiatives. Essentially, the word lean, L-E-A-N, represents the efficiency spectrum that was used by Toyota.
Oh.
And so our alliance will, for example, educate its members on how, as we manufacture things, to find the slowest part of the process and make it more efficient. Those are kind of benefits of putting a bunch of us together, as well as buying power. If we decided to buy something that we, large volumes of something, we could share it amongst members.
Okay, that's really neat. And you touch on an interesting point with education. With your background and your interests and your skills, it seems like there is room in the trades for artistry and for problem solving. What kind of advice would you give to a young person who is looking at moving into woodworking in some facet in the future?
Well, I guess the advice I could give would be more on the artistic end of it.
Right.
And either way, it would be, first off, be aware of technology. It's not a reality that's going away tomorrow.
Right.
I would point out, we're faced with a lot of odd societal concepts about how successful we will be when we're young people.
Right.
So I set out to be involved in the arts. There were 33 of us, and 6 of us have made it.
Wow.
All of the rest of them are